Happy politics and welcome back to your favorite BC politics podcast and YouTube show. This is BC Poly Hot Stove. It's been 2 weeks. I'm sure you've missed us as much as I've missed doing the show. My name is Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Orca, and joining me from what appears to be a shiny new studio in a socially distant manner is...
It's Jordan Bateman, VP Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. We are in our new office in Surrey. I clearly have to still work out the lighting because I'm shiny I'm shiny AF, but we will work that out, I promise, for next week. And in the meantime, just stop here, download the audio version, and enjoy that instead.
Yes, and for the older demographic of our audience, do not go ahead and Google shiny AF. It's not going to lead you anywhere good. He's shiny. That's all you need to know. He's bathed in natural light.
Maclean, what's been the more notable, painful absence for BC politics over the past 2 weeks? You and me, or Premier John Horgan?
Well, as much as I would like to say it's been you and me, we're not the one that's the leading issue right now. Look, here's what's happening. We could have led off by talking about the wildfires and how terrible that is in the interior. And in fact, when I say led off, we could talk the entire show about what's been happening in BC's interior. And without hijacking it, I had the opportunity to drive through it twice while we were away, and I got off easy. I only saw tunnels of smoke and fires, visible, but not immediately on top of the highway, and others did. Now, through all this, as people are being evacuated, either losing their homes or just simply being forcibly removed to a city hours down the highway, in some cases being told to prepare to sleep in their cars, and as firefighters continue to battle desperately against flames, and again, all across the province, it has become noticed that the Premier, John Horgan, is not here.
Yeah.
We discovered earlier this week that he is on the East Coast, we think in Nova Scotia, on vacation. And there have been calls for him to come back. He's not coming back now until Thursday, which is tomorrow. Jordan, where do you go with this? The NDP says that John Horgan, like everyone else, is entitled to a vacation. Mm-hmm. But, there's a crisis. And we published a piece by Drex, who is not a habitual BC Liberal water carrier. He thinks for himself, and his point was that, no, in a time like this, people need to see their leaders, and they need to hear that they have their backs. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I'm firmly in the Drex camp. It is a weird thing, because I just put the shoe on the other foot, right? Like, if it was Christy Clark who had, jammed out for 2 weeks during what seems to be the most intense wildfire season, maybe since the Great Kelowna Fire, the NDP and John Horgan would be all over it. And no excuse, no reasonable explanation would be accepted. But, the shoe's not on that foot, and, the orange-colored folks, uniform wearers, are out there saying, oh, it's all fine. Listen, there's a few things. Number one, no one knew John Horgan was away. It was basically discovered because hadn't done a press conference since, I think, August, very, very early August. Yeah. And a picture surfaced of some member of the public saying, oh, I had to go all the way to Peggy's Cove, Nova Scotia to meet the Premier of BC, and there was a picture of them with John Horgan. That's not a great look, number one. Number two, I want to go back to Sunday night. I don't know if I've ever been on Twitter as a British Columbian, as a Canadian, and frankly as a citizen of the world, and been as full of despair as I was Sunday night. Sunday night was scary on 1,000 different fronts. It was scary because the wildfires had started. West Kelowna, it was spreading down the hill in West Kelowna. It was closing in on Merritt and Kamloops. Vernon was in trouble. Merritt suddenly had an evacuation alert, like be ready to go. Highways were being closed. The Coquihalla was closed. I just driven that 2 days before. The noose was tightening around the interior, especially as far as the wildfires went. You add to that the angst on the COVID-19 variant, the numbers spiking. People are, there's talk of hospitals, Trail Hospital, for example, being overwhelmed. What does that mean? Then you add to what was going, this completely ridiculous, selfish, and we'll get to it in a moment, election call, like how tone deaf was that? And then what was going on in Afghanistan, and an earthquake in Haiti, by the way, too.
That's right.
I sat there on my Twitter, and you couldn't help but feel despair. And this is where, you look to your leaders for comments, for tweets. I mean, tweets, easy. A tweet is not a hard thing to do. And there was nothing from John Horgan. Yeah, he'd retweeted a couple days before or a day before some BC Wildfire Service notice. But it wasn't until 11:30 p.m. I think that night, which by the way is 3:30 a.m. in Nova Scotia, and tells you it probably wasn't John Horgan tweeting it out. But 11:30 p.m. That finally he kind of weighed in, even through Twitter. And what Drex is saying is, look, yeah, you're right. John Horgan's not going to be out there with a hose fighting fires and stuff. But he does have an important responsibility to inspire confidence that this thing is being well managed. And I don't think many people in British Columbia had that confidence, especially on Sunday night. So, yeah, very tone deaf of a premier. For a guy who likes to style himself as premier dad, dads are there, good dads are there when you need them, right? And our dad had buggered off to Nova Scotia and on a fishing trip, and not a word about the crises we were facing.
Yeah, you're right. And the thing that has been frustrating about this is, like everything, it's being forced into a false binary. People are making points like you and Drex have, and I think they're reasonable. And the response has been like, so you're saying he doesn't deserve a vacation? Nobody is saying that. Everyone deserves a vacation. Yeah. But, I mean, the advice I would have given if I was working for John Horgan is fine. If you won't leave Nova Scotia, can we record a call with you, a Zoom, where you're talking to evacuees in the rec center in Chilliwack, where people have been gathered, and just saying like, look, this is tough, but I need you to know we've got your back, okay? Like we're here for you, and this is hard, but here we are. That would have gone a long way, and that didn't happen. For a government that is very careful about making sure the premier releases statements for everything, including Pakistan's Independence Day, which was a recent one they sent out, and they issued a formal statement for that. That's a good thing. Yeah. There's no statement saying, to the people of Merritt or people of Logan Lake or Lytton. It's just, really? Yeah. And that's not saying, now, again, the false binary. I know someone is going to tweet at me saying, so you're saying he shouldn't release a statement on Pakistan Independence Day. No. I'm saying it's a good thing he does that. I'm wondering why he doesn't also do that for crises at home.
Yeah. Well, and okay, if you're not going to do it, at least make sure your cabinet ministers are front and center and everywhere. Yep. And, you and I have a lot of respect and time for Mike Farnworth. I think of the lot over there. He's my favorite of them. He's generally, he's partisan but not angry, if that makes sense. But, Farney it's not like Farney was all over Twitter, all over media. The situation was changing so rapidly. And, God bless the folks at Castanet, to talk about another online news service. They were doing an incredible job covering it. And their stories were being updated almost minute by minute as, things were happening, especially in West Kelowna and Kelowna. But that's not great. That is a responsibility of government as well, to try to be informing people. So there's a lot. The wheels are kind of coming off the NDP a little bit as far as managing these crises are going. I don't think the COVID thing is going as particularly well at this point. School's about to start. What does that all mean? John Horgan also, has been encouraging people not to travel to the interior. Only encouraging, which, by the way, lots of folks are still traveling to the interior. And, wants to help BC tourism businesses. He's talked about that before. And so he vacations in Nova Scotia. It just felt like Ted Cruz running off to Cancun during the winter storm in Texas, right? Shades of that. And it's not a good look. So extremely tone deaf. I'm shocked he hasn't come back yet. That first news conference, I imagine, will be as feisty a news conference as Horgan and the media have had since his opposition days. And frankly, he deserves to be taken behind the woodshed a little bit by the media for this. Although I was amazed by the Keith Baldry tweet, supporting this man's wonderful, that to me was mind-boggling. I get it, Keith. He deserves a vacation. No one's saying that. Take it in September. Take it in BC. Still be plugged in. Have Farney out front a lot more than you did. There are ways around that. It was not a good look.
Yeah, I mean, the context here that's important is that the wildfire crisis, from the beginning, the NDP kind of wrong-footed themselves, because the perception and my sense was that they kind of talked themselves into thinking that all these calls to declare a state of emergency were driven by the opposition BC Liberals, and that wasn't the case. It was really coming from, regional leaders, First Nations, municipalities, and yes, absolutely, a lot of BC Liberals, because they represent most of these ridings, amplified that. But I think they convinced themselves that this was, this was politics. That's all this was. And so it just seems like they can't quite get themselves right on this issue. And it's one that shouldn't be that hard, quite frankly. It's just a question of, as you pointed out, and as I think Drex wrote really well, of just being seen. Yeah. And that people know that, whatever happens in the next few weeks, you're there for them.
Yeah. I mean, for a guy who claimed that he wanted to heal the rural-urban divide in British Columbia, he's only created a deeper chasm. And I'm not sure rural folks will ever trust this again, right? Like, it is sad. It is split and polarized British Columbia even further. Horgan will claim that it's somehow the BC Liberals' fault, or it's a politics thing. No, this was very much a regional chasm that all of us have felt who work in both urban and rural areas. It's mind-boggling to me. One thing I want to say as well is I'm not convinced that every resource possible is being mustered for this, and here's why. There are a number of integrated police units in British Columbia where RCMP officers work with city police officers, for example, Vancouver Police Department, Delta Police Department, that sort of thing. Many of those RCMP officers have been redeployed to fire areas because when you evacuate a town and all the firefighters are focusing on fighting the fire, it does leave Logan Lake open for theft and all sorts of things. So you need police to kind of keep folks out, keep it safe, blah blah blah. City police officers attached to those units are not being sent there to help. They're being kept here, and it comes down to essentially an insurance thing. Who will cover them in case of a catastrophic incident? If an officer is hurt or killed, God forbid, killed in the line of fighting fires or protecting a community, who will pay that? And the RCMP is like, well, we're not going to pay it. VPD should pay it. VPD is like, well, no, if you're being sent as part of an RCMP unit, RCMP should pay it. That tells me that there's at least one little piece of disconnect there where you're not really mustering every resource possible. And, it's a small one because obviously the police aren't on the front line fighting the fire, but they do make it safe for the folks who do fight the fire. That's important. So this is the frustration I think a lot of rural folks are having, is that it didn't feel like it mattered to John Horgan. It didn't feel like it mattered to the folks who lived in Victoria with beautiful clean air and no smoke. And then it kind of all culminated that Sunday night where people were terrified.
Yeah, and they were. And I mean, I count myself among them. That was a terrible night, doom scrolling until 1 a.m. Instead of going to bed and getting sleep. The other big news today is actually it's happening as we speak. We're taping shortly after the formal announcement came for what is going to replace the George Massey tunnel. It's another tunnel. It's not a bridge. And a couple, again, I apologize because this is happening literally as we talk, but the key takeaways so far for me at least are capacity is not going to increase. It's going to be the same as what we have currently with the George Massey tunnel. And I think the projected completion date was 2030. And there's a 3.5-year period starting essentially now where they're going to have to do another environmental assessment. And the budget is back up to, and again, I apologize, I heard it, but I don't have it in front of me, but it's more than $4 billion. There are municipalities are excited, I guess, because, any proposal is better than the nothing and the limbo that we've been in for the last few years. But it's hard to see this as a win for the NDP, especially since there's no possibility that this will be anywhere near started or much less done by the time of the next provincial election. In fact, we might have an environmental assessment certificate then, hopefully.
Maybe. I doubt it. You're right. So let's take it piece by piece. Let's talk about capacity first. If you don't use the George Massey Tunnel regularly, it is a major choke point in the Lower Mainland, and it's a especially troubling one because that is the highway that links to the major border crossing with the United States, also the Tsawwassen Ferry Terminal, also Delta Port, which is a major, where a lot of trucks go to and from. You go through the tunnel into Richmond, which then has the international airport and a number of warehouse businesses, and then you go on another bridge into Vancouver. So this is like as important a piece of infrastructure as we have economically in British Columbia. It's also used by tens of thousands of commuters every day. So it is clogged. At rush hour, it is jam-packed. You'll wait for a long time. And right now, during rush hour, they switch over one of the lanes. It's a 4-lane tunnel. They switch over one of the lanes, so you have 3 lanes going in the direction you need to go in rush hour. The problem we have here is the tunnel that they have now announced to replace it. They say is an 8-lane tunnel, but one of those lanes is only for bus rapid transit. Not for cars, not for electric vehicles, not for HOV, only for bus rapid transit. That means you have the same number of lanes going through the tunnel rush hour 10 years from now as you do today, 3. That is not enough capacity. So you have that. Number 2, they're giving you an inferior product. One of the big things about the Christie Clark Bridge, 10-lane bridge that had been approved, was they were doing the preload for, the bids were coming in at way under budget, which we'll talk about in a minute. One of the biggest things was that bridge was being built with the idea that someday it could handle light rail or even SkyTrain over the bridge, which is great because eventually you want to have a web of SkyTrain and rail across the region in order to move people transit-wise. In order to save money on this tunnel, they have cut that out. It will be bus rapid transit today, or when it's built in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. It will only be bus rapid transit. And you're basically dooming the South Fraser to a very specific type of inferior transit service. Now, oh, Jordan, you're the guy who fought the TransLink tech, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that doesn't mean I hated transit. I want transit. I want good transit. Trains are good transit. Buses are a pain and are not expandable long term. So you're saying to the South Surrey area, that's it, bus rapid transit for you forever, which is an inferior form of transit and will not be as popular as a train would be, therefore ensuring that people still use the cars. Maclean, I know you were in the briefing that media get ahead of time.
Yeah.
I imagine capacity was a big issue because you brought it up first, so I'm sensing that probably was a comment. But to me, this is the same capacity tomorrow, like the same capacity with the new tunnel as it is with the old tunnel. So am I wrong? Like, did they have a defense of that, or?
No, I mean, no. I mean, in a technical, I have to be careful because in a technical briefing, the responses and questions are not for attribution. But essentially, you're right. And that they pointed to exactly what you pointed to, which is the fact that in the current tunnel, they reverse one lane so that there's more traffic going in the prevailing direction of rush hour. That will not be the case with the new tunnel, but it's not going to increase capacity. And as you pointed out, look, the population of the Lower Mainland is growing. It's growing fast, and some of the places it's growing, places like Richmond and Delta. You're quite right to say this kind of hamstrings them. It's going to be hard for them to recruit businesses and investment and get people enticed to commute if. I mean, no one's sneering at buses here. Bus is better than nothing. But I mean, I think we can all agree, being adults, that your average commuter would much rather take the train than a bus, and much rather take a train over a bridge than a bus in a tunnel. Yeah. And we'll see. Well, I'm actually going to be quite fascinated to see the wider reaction because, as I say, this is being announced right now. Yeah. But yeah, that's where we stand as of where we're taping.
Look, with the bus, so bus may be great for 10 years or 15 years. The tunnel, I assume they want it to last 50, 60, 75 years. So what happens in year 20, year 30? You haven't roughed it in a way that you can expand it. I hope to God that they're at least roughing it in, or going to build it in a way that someday they could switch one of those lanes over during rush hour, although it sounds like they're not. That to me would be forward thinking as well. But look, let's not lose sight of this, and this can transition to the budget. The reason they're not doing that stuff is they're trying desperately to make the tunnel seem like it's roughly the same price as the bridge that they, tossed out the window because Christie Clark proposed it and not them. And so what they're doing is they're cutting everything they can out of it, and you're going to get an inferior product that takes longer to build for more money. Like, it's crazy. My understanding is the difference between the bridge and the tunnel in NDP business plan land was, negligible, like less than $100 million or something like that. Which 100 million is a lot of money, I'm not saying that. But in the scheme of a, $4 billion project, 100 million is not like make or break time. But they cut all these little things out in order to make this work for their budget and to try to justify. But listen, let's be clear. Inferior capacity to the 10-lane bridge, longer timeline. Remember, Christie's Bridge would have been open next year. This tunnel won't be open until 2030, and that's if it's on time and they actually get their environmental permits on time, and if they pass UNDRIP, which I'm not sure they will necessarily, because the Tsawwassen First Nation had been pretty adamant up till now that they preferred to bridge to another tunnel.
That is true.
TFN's a very powerful, well-run, well-organized Indigenous government. Now, they have lots of irons on the fire. They may, you got to choose your battles, and everyone understands that. But if they wanted to make an issue of this, they could. And that's an interesting thing here too. I haven't seen. I mean, it's early. I haven't seen any reaction from Tsawwassen First Nation yet. I'll be looking forward to seeing what they have to say and other Indigenous groups. It's problematic. So I just, it just comes down to politics, right? They canceled this bridge, not because they cared what the regional mayors say. The NDP don't care what regional mayors say. They fight with mayors all the time. Like, honestly, that's just cover. They don't care what Malcolm Brody says in Richmond. They'll build whatever the hell they want to build. They cared because Christy Clark promised this bridge, and they didn't want it. They didn't like her, and they didn't want her to have any kind of legacy at all, so they killed it. And now a bridge that would have been open in 2022 will now be an inferior product, a tunnel open in 2030. Okay, one more thing on capacity we didn't talk about.
Yeah.
You're telling me that we need to spend money to actually have a separate tube for pedestrians and cyclists? No offense, pedestrian, who would want to walk through a tunnel? If you're walking through the tunnel in your own little claustrophobic tube, I guess my sense is you're not doing it for sightseeing. You're doing it in order to get somewhere, right? Because all you're going to see is a wall for a long way, and the tunnel is longer than you think. A bridge, okay, you can see nice views of the boats and right, whatever. But this you're going to go through, why? Why bother? You gotta go in its own little tube. It's crazy. It's crazy to me.
You'll know the area better than I do. I've taken the tunnel many times, but I'm not clear on where people would be walking to and from, specifically, right? If you factor in what will be a very long walk just in the tunnel, where are they coming from and what's the destination that they wouldn't be doing, on one of these amazing buses?
Yes. Well, exactly. And cyclists, okay, I guess cyclists can go a little further, but again, you're going from farmland to farmland, right? I'm not sure, Bill Vanderzam lives in Ladner. I'm not sure old Bill's getting on his bike, and God bless him, good Dutch man. I know he has a bike, and I've seen him riding it on his farm. I don't think he and Lillian are going out on their bikes for a ride through this tube. So I didn't understand that one. The timeline thing is interesting too, because we said when they canceled the bridge that they were basically punting this for a decade. We've been proven correct. My understanding is a 8-lane bridge, even if they didn't build Christie's Bridge but built a smaller bridge, would have been ready 2 years sooner than a tunnel.
Yeah.
This is a sign. This should be a very strong signal to people living in Richmond Delta and South Surrey, even in Langley, who use the 99. The NDP do not care about your weight, your commute, your struggles. They just don't care. When it comes to Massey, they don't care. They'd rather stick it to Christy Clark than anything else. And then on budget, the Christie Bridge budget was $3.5 billion. They were out doing tenders for it. And I believe it was Todd Stone, who was Minister of Transportation at the time. He has said since that they had a bid on the bridge for $2.6 billion. Oof. Now we're going to spend more than $4 billion on an inferior product that took longer.
Budgeted more than for now.
Yes.
So likely, let's be honest, likely more than that.
Exactly. And we should mention, this is a cost estimate. This has not actually been approved by Treasury Board. It is not in any provincial budget. It might have been approved by Treasury Board, I don't know about that. But it's not in any BC budget. And that's part of the reason why they're punting 3 years of environmental assessments, because that gives them 4 years to figure out how to actually pay for it. But you could have had a bridge for $2.6 billion. And let's say that quote was like crazy and it went 20% over. Well, you'd still get it for what, 3.1, 3.2? That's still saving you $1 billion at least for what they're planning here, this inferior product. So great job, NDP. Way to make sure you're getting value for my taxpayer dollar by blowing $1 billion more on something that's going to be inferior. It's just, this to me is very interesting. And how weird, Maclean, announced right now, dead of summer.
Yes.
John Horgan, 3,000, I don't know, how far is Nova Scotia? 3,000 kilometers away? 4,000 kilometers away?
Oh, it's more than that. Yeah,
4 time zones away?
Like, yeah.
And they're announcing it today. So that tells me everything I need to know about how serious the NDP are about this. Are they going to release the business plan? Have they announced that?
They have, yes. They have not yet released it. It will be released apparently sometime today. I have not seen it.
Okay. Well, I look forward to looking through that and trying to figure out how they managed to get to this even keel number and whatnot. I also noticed they never, in the press releases, they didn't mention any CBA or union only hiring. I guess that will probably come later once they actually have environmental approvals.
I suspect that is one of the questions that will be clarified in the the Q&A that will follow the official announcement. That's probably already happened by now, to be quite honest, as we tape. It was addressed in the technical briefing, and all I will say is the answer was not. It was a little vague, and there'll be more clarification from the minister in that later today, or as I say, already happened. It's probably on Twitter as we speak, but we'll find out. This will not be the last time we bring up the Massey Tunnel.
No.
This issue is not going anywhere. And you mentioned it happening, the dead of summer with everything else happening. We've gone this far into the show without mentioning the big other thing that's happening, and that's a federal election. Yes, we're having another snap pandemic federal election. Where do you even begin? We knew this was coming. This was not exactly a secret. So, there's no shock. The people were talking about a federal election as early as last year. Mm-hmm. This is still only 2 years since the last election. I was looking at some of the writing that you and I did in the last election, and it's still fresh because it's just 2 years old.
You're saying I can plagiarize myself? This is beautiful.
There's been some change. We have a new Green leader. We can talk about her. We have a new Conservative leader. Obviously, Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh are in their same roles. But we talked about the wildfires. We don't need to talk about that anymore. And I wonder how much people in Ottawa think that's worth delaying an election over. They don't. But with case counts spiking once again, and the fact that, all the same arguments we had last year, that, look, the government's stable. It's passing all the things that matter. Yep. We don't need to be doing this. We all know the reason. I spoke with Jody Vance on CKNW about this yesterday. The reason we're doing this is the Liberals think they can win a majority government. That is the entire reason. Everything else is just fluff. That's why we're doing this.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. It's the classic thing, just like John Horgan did, of one man putting his job ahead of the jobs and welfare of everyone else in the country, in this case. This federal election, I don't know. I was heartened by the Nova Scotia result, which had the first incumbent government being kicked out in the COVID era. That tells me that maybe people are ready to, kind of divorce themselves from the, don't change horses in midstream logic that we've been clinging to for a long time. My sense is millennials are not as enthused with Justin Trudeau as they were whenever they first voted for him 7 years ago. Certainly not even a couple years ago. The Liberal campaign, I don't think, has had a good start. Afghanistan, those images of Afghanistan are stunning and heartbreaking. And, it's not the number one issue, I think, for a lot of people to vote on, but there's a moral authority that Trudeau claimed to have. Canada is back, baby. Canada is not back. Canada turned its back on people who were working with us in Afghanistan, but Canada's not back. And that troubles me in a lot of ways from a foreign affairs perspective, but it also troubles me because it's another example of where Trudeau has said one thing and done another. To me, you're seeing what happens when the government starts to accumulate baggage. Remember, opposition parties don't get elected. Governments defeat themselves generally.
Yes.
And, you know, I think back, I saw a tweet from an Indigenous leader, and it was like, you know, Trudeau promised us clean water on every reserve by 2020. Here's the water coming out of my tap today, and it was brown. 51 Indigenous reserves apparently are still under boil water advisories. That's like a fundamental human right. Like, that's one of these things where I'm like, whatever it costs, whatever it takes, let's just get water to towns like that. Like, come on. You know, I make donations to groups that do this in Africa and Asia. And, like, we can't do this in Indigenous Canada. Come on. And so all these things start to kind of fall apart. His nonsense yesterday, the word salad about the she-cession and, you know, the she-covery, was just that, you know, it was like we lead from the heart outward. The budget will balance itself. But now we've had 7 years of we've led from the heart outward, and we've, you know, the budget hasn't balanced itself. It's not going to balance till 2070. You're starting to see that baggage start to accumulate. And so I understand why he decided to go now, because it's not going to get better in a year or two. I mean, he can't help himself spending-wise. They're just going to continue to put Canada into the ditch like that. So I hope it comes back to bite him, is what I'm saying. Like, I see a little bit of movement in Jagmeet Singh. I can tell you my kids have a view and relationship with Jagmeet that many of us do not, and it's because of TikTok and social media. He's so much better than everyone else on it.
Better than everyone else combined.
Yeah, or it's, you know, someone on staff, or a combination of both.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. The point is that they're very effective.
Totally. And, you know, I can see the NDP coming up in the polls slightly. That's, you know, good news for the Tories. The Tories aren't setting the world on fire by any stretch of the imagination. I have big questions about big chunks of their platform, which are shockingly, you know, kind of lefty in their views in some of it. But, you know, I just hope that there's some traction. Like, I don't mind another minority government. I don't think. And as you know, as long as there's some checks and balances, I just don't think we should be giving Trudeau a majority at this point.
Yeah. Well, the thing that took me, that I took away from the first week, is you pointed to the Liberals not having a great first week, and I agree with that. And the thing that struck me is one of their usual go-tos in the playbook didn't work for them. And in fact, it would be too much to say it blew up in their face, but it didn't work. And one of the things that the Liberal Party, under a number of leaders now, has excelled at is maintaining one position for a very long period of time. Maybe it's, you know, the best sport in the world is hockey. Doesn't matter what it is, something ridiculous. And then this morning they will say, actually, the best sport in the world is lacrosse. And the Conservatives will have agreed with the best sport is hockey all this time, and now it's you know, the Conservatives want to take us back to an era when we thought hockey was a good sport. You know, we Canadians won't stand for this kind of paleo thinking. They're very, very good at this, at suddenly changing their mind and then expressing shock and horror that people haven't already been there or come along with them. Yeah. They tried this with mandatory vaccinations. And again, it doesn't matter if you agree with this or disagree with it, but they had very abruptly shifted positions saying that, well, now all federal workers will have to be vaccinated on, you know, or there'll be consequences. In other words, they'll be fired. That the Conservatives and the Liberals up until that morning had the same position, which is that we encourage everyone to get vaccinated, but, you know, we're not going to force anyone. And Trudeau's attempt to turn this into well, I can't believe Erin O'Toole won't force federal workers. Doesn't he take the pandemic seriously? And it didn't work. And to me, that was it kind of raised my eyebrow. Again, not because of the policy. I don't have a problem with mandatory vaccinations, to be honest with you. But the fact that the media and in the general public kind of went, yeah, no, you just changed your mind. And that's, I mean, even if I don't like these guys, you had the exact same opinion as them yesterday, and it's just not working. Yeah. That was interesting to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the media have been a little tougher on Trudeau this time than previous. It's so hard because there's just, for me, I'm so distracted by everything going on in British Columbia that I cannot give you like a sense as to what are the issues anywhere else in Canada. And it's just so hard for me to muster like my give a damn meter. Sorry, folks who are listening to this in the car with their kids. My give a damn meter on this is so low at this point.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't look at any political party, even the Conservatives, who I'll probably end up voting for, as having any kind of, like, I'm not excited. Like, I'm not like, ooh, this platform, fantastic. I can't wait to get out there and vote for this government to instill, like, and I wonder how many folks are like me out there, whether it's between the NDP and the Liberals or the Liberals and the Conservatives, and, you know, the Conservatives and the PPC. And if you're thinking that, give your head a shake. The PPC are, you know, nuts. But, like, I don't know. Like, I saw an election sign in Langley the other day, and I was like, "Oh, look, an election sign!" You know, and just
I haven't seen one yet. Not one.
Not one of the incumbents. You know, I'm just not excited about it, and maybe it's because I'm concerned about our friends and ICBA members who are struggling in other parts of the province with the wildfires, and maybe it's the fact that, you know, this election feels so unnecessary. But I will say this: that is a bad place for Trudeau to be. Trudeau needs. The people who hate Trudeau will climb over broken glass to have a chance to vote for him. I can vote against him, and I'm one of those people. I don't like Trudeau. I want him gone. I will, you know, I will make sure I'm at the polling station no matter, even though I don't really care that much about Aaron O'Toole yet, or in that enthusiasm. But I want Trudeau out because I think he's, you know, I think he's disingenuous more than anything. That's a problem for Trudeau. Like, are Liberal voters excited to go to the polls? I don't get that sense even on Twitter, which is usually a hotbed for them.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I suspect that you're onto something there. You're obviously always onto something, but I think you've hit a rich nugget there when you say it's hard to say what this election's about, and I think that's kind of by design in that the Liberals. Well, I can tell you, the Liberals want this election to be kind of a referendum on how the pandemic has gone. And, you know, it's, hey, isn't it great that most of us are vaccinated? And, you know, if you haven't, that's your problem, but you've had the chance. That's what they want this election to be about. You know, you're welcome for getting the vaccine supply earlier than some people thought. But it hasn't really gone that way. And they're hoping that people will just sort of not feel all that enthused about Aaron O'Toole or Jagmeet Singh or Annamie Paul or anyone else, or Yves-François Blanchet, and say, well, yeah, I guess just not rock the boat. That's what they want, because they saw that work here in BC.
Look, I remember when Trump America was skyrocketing past us as far as vaccination goes. So I'm not going to give I'm not going to give my vote to a government that was barely competent. Like, you know, congratulations, you know, great job. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And we compare ourselves to America now, but we need to remember America's 330 million people. We're 35 million. It's a big difference of scale. And we're a country that was born based on government giving us our rights, not on seizing them as the Americans did. And we're a country that has universal health care, which, you know, has a different kind of expectation on these things than what the Americans have. And also, if it weren't for America, we wouldn't have a vaccine and we'd be screwed. So let's not forget that either.
Very true.
You know, so I'm not going to give them, like, what has Justin Trudeau done that's so great on COVID? Like, CERB feels like a long time ago, and in its final few months was not the productive program that it was at the beginning. The wage subsidy, you know, I think, you know, Jagmeet Singh's done a very good job of jumping out and grabbing that issue and saying, you know, the wage subsidy went to companies that ended up, you know, paying shareholders and things like that, right? Like, that's been sullied a little bit by some of the media reporting. The vaccine procurement, okay, you know, we still don't have a national strategy or masking, man. So, okay, great job, Justin. You spoke from Rideau College every day, and it was heartwarming, and, you know, my grandma liked it. Like, okay, but what does it mean, right? Like, so, and where do we go from here, and what's your plan for the economy? You know, that to me is the biggest concern. Inflation numbers continue to rise, and if people's buying power continues to be diminished, you can forget about worrying about housing affordability. You're going to be worried about all affordability.
Grocery affordability.
Exactly. If you're making $75,000 a year, which I think is the average wage in British Columbia for a household, or was last time I checked, but all of a sudden your groceries have gone from $200 a week to $230 a week, and, you know, your gasoline's gone from, you know, $50 a week to $70 a week, and all these little creeping costs. You know, we can have the best housing affordability plan in the world. It won't matter. people will not have the income in order to make it happen, or the buying power to make it happen. And taxes are also kind of creeping upwards as well. So these are the issues that I'm like, this is what I'd really like you to talk about, is like, I know inflation isn't a sexy topic to talk about, but if I have less buying power today than I did yesterday, what does that actually mean? And this is where I will say one thing about the Tory platform. The 1 month GST cut, essentially saying every December they'll cut the GST from 5 to 2. Normally I would be like, well, it's kind of weird. It's kind of a weird suggestion, but I get it. I get it. Like, there are people who are sitting on money and could make investments. And if you do allow that kind of window where all of a sudden things are 3 or 4 or 5% cheaper to do it, that is an interesting way to counteract the inflationary pressure. And I was sort of back and forth. I forget which economist I read. Not normally a Tory guy, but he was like, no, this actually makes sense. Like, this actually could work. In fact, I'd go a little further. I might go 6 weeks to give people more time to plan for blah, blah, blah. That was interesting. So at least they were trying to be creative in coming up with ways, coming up with things. But look, the bottom line is, Maclean, like, you can't afford to be able to buy less going forward. Like, we have to find a way to bring inflation back to heel.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that policy. I have not yet made up my mind on it. Like you, I am interested, but I'm not sure. I do think it's a little hilarious with some of the objections. Well, do you know how much this will reduce government revenues? Okay. Our deficit is like, it doesn't matter. We've long since crossed that bridge. So I mean, yes, but who cares at this point? It's stimulating spending might actually be a better thing. This has been, I mean, we should have guessed because we had a 2-week holiday between you and I. Neither of us went to Nova Scotia, to the best of my knowledge. But in that time, of course, we've had our usual weekly segment is Jordan updates us on the BC Liberal leadership race. And, there was actually some major news while we were away. We have another official, not a surprise, but now an official entrant in Renee Merrifield.
Didn't I say, Maclean, in our last show, BC Day weekend would be a great time for Renee Merrifield to launch?
You did indeed, and I've been waiting for you to tout that.
I told you also. And, she's in the race. I'm actually seeing her for coffee tomorrow night. My understanding she's in Vancouver for a few days meeting with folks, and very kindly invited me for coffee. So I'm going to go meet her. I've never met her in person before. I'm looking forward to that. Look, Renee, smart, strong candidate from the heartlands, as Gordon Campbell would call it, the basket, what was it, the womb of a democracy, the cradle of democracy, was that it? Or the cradle of free enterprise?
Something like that, the cradle of free enterprise.
In Kelowna. I do think she's done a good job of walking the line this week especially of, I assume she's meeting with media and BC Liberal Sports, doing that, but not in a way to exploit wildfires. Like, it would have been very easy for her to be like, I'm the MLA for Kelowna and there's fires everywhere. And like, she could have been all over the place. I'm not sure that would have been a great strategy for her. She avoided that. She talked about wildfires, on Twitter and with her local media as she should, but she wasn't trying to capitalize on it, is what I'm saying. Because that'd be sort of ghoulish, which is smart. We're still at that phase in the leadership race where everyone is being nice to everyone else. And, I get the emails from all the campaigns because I'm a, BC Liberal member and riding association president. And it's like, I agree with Gavin. Gavin agrees with Ellis. And Ellis agrees with Michael. And Michael agrees with Val. And Val thinks Falcon is great. And, I think there's kind of all these little, fun little things. And they all sort of say the same stuff. I will say the email that cut through the clutter for me this week was one from Val Litwin, in which he highlighted a BC Wildfire Service person who had written quite extensively on Twitter, highlighted that and talked about his experience, making sure that person had every resource possible. I thought that was a very effective way of cutting through the clutter on that. Falcon went hard on John Horgan. Where is he? Why is he in Nova Scotia? That's very typical for the Falcon brand. As the front runner, the more he's fighting John Horgan, the better off he is, I think. Though, don't pick on Michael Lee. Here's what I would say about the race. I feel like Falcon is firmly in command, in control at this point of the race. I feel like he's leading. I could not tell you who's in second place. And that to me is a problem for those folks because you got to get to second before you can get to first. Like you have to be kind of the consensus person. Like, all right, this is the second best person in the field. Well, there's Renee or Michael or whoever. Like, and everyone's going to kind of feed into that and slowly move you up. I do not feel like we have that yet, and that tells me that there's a lot of work to be done. I think the first debate's September 8th. That will be interesting. Will they actually start to get a little feisty with each other? Probably not there. Probably the next one. But at some point, the race will turn from kumbaya to, this guy's a little bit out to lunch and you can't really try, there will have to be some nitpicking here at some point.
You're right. I mean, if experience is any guide, everything will be all friendly and happy for a while, and then behind the scenes is where that'll start to change.
Yes.
And then publicly. And you're right. Yeah, we haven't got there yet. And I mean, with the distraction of the federal election and of course the necessary diversion of attention to things like the wildfires, it may take longer than it would have ordinarily, but we'll see. And it is, it's more interesting now that we have Renee Merrifield as an official candidate rather than me asking you every week when's she gonna do it.
Well, when it will start to get a little bit bumpy in the interpersonal dynamics between the candidates is when the first two candidates basically cut a deal for second votes. Yes. And I'll throw this out here. I have no inside information. It's throwing two random members. But when Michael Lee makes a deal with Alice Ross and says, I'm going to tell my guys to support you second, you tell your guys to support me second, and that comes out, that will then get things kind of, that turns the waters, right? Like it'll change then. So at some point that will, that idea will be sent out there and that deal will be made by whoever. And at that point, then it starts to get really, really interesting if you like, political knife fights and backroom brawling. As I do.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't?
As I generally do. I mean, I don't want to be in it. I just want to observe it from afar and enjoy it.
This might be our longest ever episode, Jordan.
God, you people are lucky.
We haven't
even done our Gillian Stead break where we talk about your terrible Calgary Stampeders.
Oh, man. Yeah. I went and I was going to see them play their first game, but I had to leave early to get through the BC highways. And, we got to watch them practice, and now they're 0-2 and facing our best player has a broken leg of all injuries, and things look a little bleak.
Yeah, look, the BC Lions are 1-1, and that's with the injured quarterback themselves. So no one's more surprised, I think, than the BC Lions, but there you go.
No, and I mean, I've said from the beginning that if Calgary doesn't do well, the Stamps don't do well, I'm happy to see the Lions do very well. If this is going to be a lost year for my team, and I hope it isn't, I hope the Lions go all the way because the starting quarterback now, Michael Riley, is an excellent player and fun to watch, but also his backup is from right here in beautiful Victoria, Nathan Rourke. How often do we get a Victoria-born quarterback at the pro level? It's cool.
I gotta say, you could tell they hadn't had a preseason. Like the football was pretty choppy the first couple weeks. So
it was.
I suspect there'll be another week or two like that, and then it'll settle into a bit of a rhythm. It's only a 14-game season this year, so if you are having to be miserable, better a 14-game year season than an 18.
Yeah, and the more you know about football, the more you know this is true. With less time, defenses are always ahead of offenses, and so that has been certainly the case the first couple of weeks. The defenses are a little more ready and a little more finely tuned than the offenses are, and that's just the way football works. Yep. Hopefully the offenses will catch up. Yes.
Nothing like a riveting 15-9 game with 4 picks by Bo Levi Mitchell to keep the viewers coming in. That's great.
I mean, on a broken leg,
wow.
But yes.
I mean,
I just bought for the first time. I haven't bought a jersey since I was in university, but I bought one. I bought his new anniversary year jersey. And hopefully he wears it more than twice this year. Bo, come back. I miss you.
Well, keep Bo leaving. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. Well, and we'll keep Bo leaving until next week, and there will be a show next week. We're not taking another break, at least not a scheduled one, for a while. Anyway, he's Jordan Bateman. I'm Maclean K. Until then, happy politics.